Okay, great. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Wendy Wendlandt, the acting president of Environment America and a trustee of the Green Century Funds, the first family of responsible and diversified fossil fuel-free funds in the United States. I'm moderating this session from my hometown of Portland, Oregon, where wildfires brought Portland the worst air quality in the entire world last week. Whether you're a member of Environment America or one of our state organizations or a Green Century investor or simply someone deeply concerned about the planet, welcome. For the next hour, we'll talk about this current moment: wildfires, hurricanes, dire news of collapsing ice shelves, and how it underscores the need for climate action. One of the best solutions is renewable energy. Environment America works in 29 states and in the nation's capital, and has been a pioneer in advancing clean energy and renewable energy since the 1970s. We have two terrific panelists with us today. First, Johanna Neumann, Environment America's own Senior Director for 100% Renewable Energy. She'll kick us off with an overview about the important role that renewable energy can play in tackling climate change. Then she'll be followed by Dan Jacobson, our Environment California Director. Dan has led the fight in California to advance renewable energy by passing the first renewable energy, or sometimes called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, coming out of the California blackouts in the early 2000s, followed by the passage of 1 million solar roofs, and most recently, SB 100, California's law setting a goal of 100% clean energy by 2045. We'll then return to Johanna, who will talk about actions you can take to support these efforts. We'll then have time for some Q&A, and we'll wrap up by 11 o'clock Pacific or 2 o'clock Eastern. For those of you on Facebook Live, we'll be monitoring comments there, so please feel free to engage in the conversation there. For those on Zoom, make sure to click on the speaker view in the upper right-hand corner, particularly if you don't have us up full screen. So with that, Johanna, take it away.
Thanks so much, Wendy, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Johanna Neumann, Senior Director of Environment America's campaign for 100% renewable energy. And in this introduction to the webinar, I really want to focus on the choice before us. You know, I'm sitting here in my home in Amherst, Massachusetts, where we have been struggling all summer with a massive drought. The rivers that my family loves to paddle on here in Western Massachusetts have basically been reduced to a trickle this summer. And there are many routes that we've often traveled that are literally closed to us because there's not enough water in the rivers. Meanwhile, my brother lives in San Francisco, and he, like many people in that part of the country, has, posted apocalyptic looking orange sky pictures on Facebook, and has told me about how he and his girlfriend, have to sleep next to the air filter in their apartment so that they have air that they can breathe. So, the impacts of climate change, I think, are touching everyone in America, and it's deeply personal. And for me, all of those impacts really underscore the choice before us. We can either continue burning fossil fuels, destroying wild places, polluting our air, polluting our water, harming our health, and fundamentally destabilizing our climate, not just today, but for future generations. Or we can choose a different path. And I think most of us who are on the webinar today have already made this choice. We have already decided that we want to repower America with 100% clean renewable energy. And we are demonstrating that choice not just by our investment in Green Century funds, but also by supporting and taking action with Environment America. And the sooner that we can get more people to join that movement and get our decision makers to act on it at a broader level, the sooner we'll be able to not only see the benefits of a clean energy future, but also rein in the ever worsening impacts of climate change. One of the things that I really love about working at Environment America is that we meet the moment. So, there's no denying that right now, things in the United States are very challenging, but no matter what the circumstances, we find a way to make a difference. And when things look bleak, we look for solutions. And thankfully, when it comes to clean energy, the solutions abound. You know, today, at this moment in history, with the progress we've made, we can power our entire country with clean, renewable energy sources, not only all of it, but more affordably and more efficiently than ever in the history of humanity. And the next slide, please, Bryn, will show a figure from a report that Environment America Research and Policy Center put out a few years ago called We Have the Power. And this figure pulls data from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and compares the potential of clean energy in the United States with our actual electricity consumption. And so you can see that big yellow sun represents utility scale photovoltaic potential. The orange circle represents concentrated solar technicals potential. The green circle represents onshore wind's potential. The blue circle represents the potential of offshore wind. And the smallest circle here in the figure, the yellow circle, represents rooftop solar's potential. By contrast, if you look to the right, there's a small white circle outlined in red. And that small circle represents the entire electricity consumption of our country. And so you can see in one figure how incredibly abundant our clean energy potential is. And that if we tap into just a sliver of each of these technologies, not only can we power our homes, but we actually could power our transportation, our businesses, our manufacturing, truly our entire economy with abundant, clean, renewable sources that never run out. And that's the vision that we're working for. So just to come back to the idea of a choice, it truly is a choice. And the sooner that we as a country make the choice towards 100% renewable energy, the sooner we will have cleaner air to breathe, cleaner water to drink, and be assured of a better future for our children and our grandchildren. In many ways, California is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to climate change. Because California has a highly managed environment, that state is uniquely vulnerable to climate change. And so it's also somewhat ironic that this is the state that has done the most to advance clean energy potential in the United States. And so at this point, I'd love to turn it over to our State Director for Environment California, Dan Jacobson, who will tell us the story of the work that he and Environment California have done to advance clean energy and battle climate change in that state.
Thank you so much, Johanna. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Dan Jacobson. I'm the State Director for Environment California. Originally, I'm from New York City, but have lived the past 23 years out here in California. And I can definitely tell you that I feel like a canary in a coal mine, but really not in a great way. For the past couple of weeks, me and my family have had to get up and check the apps on our phone to see how close the fires are to the houses and to the people that we know and to the people that we love. We have to check apps several times a day to see what the air quality is, to see if it's safe to go outside, to see if it's safe for my stepdaughters to walk out the door and to walk the new puppy that they got during COVID-19. And that's not great. And I really want to echo the point that you made earlier about choices. And we have a choice that we have to make right now as to whether we want to continue down a path of using fossil fuels that are dirty and dangerous, or if we want to make a different choice and move to clean energy. And what I want to talk about here are 3 projects that Environment California has worked on over the past 20 years that I've been here that have met with critical acclaim because they've been successful at helping us to make that choice, helping us to move from fossil fuels to clean energy. And the first one that I want to talk about is the Million Solar Roofs campaign. The goal was to install 3,000 megawatts of clean energy, solar power, on our roofs. The strategy, or the way that we thought we would be able to install so much solar power, was by helping to drive the price of solar down. When this law was first passed in 2006 by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, solar was still something that was used by Malibu millionaires or sort of backwoods people who wanted to live off the grid. It was not a everyday appliance that could be seen on homes all over the state of California. We thought it was really important to be able to make that change. So what we did is we passed a law that created a declining 10-year rebate. So the rebates were highest in the first couple of years, and every couple of years they went down. And that was to help offset the higher cost in the beginning of the years. And as more people purchased solar, the price of the solar panels went down, so the rebate could obviously go down. In 2019, in November, we celebrated the installation of the 1 millionth solar panel in California. The original goal was to put in, as I said, 3,000 megawatts of clean energy, but this project was so successful that we ended up putting in what is just short of 9,000 megawatts of clean energy onto California rooftops. It was a huge success, and the reason I wanted to put this slide up is because I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the incredible heat wave that California faced just a couple of weeks ago. The heat wave was intense. It was not scheduled, obviously. This is the kind of results that we're going to see with more climate change. It's this kind of extreme weather that we're having. But thanks to the solar panels that we'd installed over the past 15 years here in California, we were able to stave off the blackouts. And I want to show this a little bit complicated, but the yellow line shows what the amount of energy that California would have used without solar. The red line shows what California was able to use because we had those solar panels installed. And as you can clearly see, we used less energy that we needed to get from the central grid because of the solar panels that we had installed. And then just to make the point even more profound, we wanted to include what would it look like if we added 3 gigawatts of storage, which is one of the critical reasons that people were talking about, into the mix. And as you can see, adding in those gigawatts takes us to about 10 o'clock at night when we can really be going off of clean energy and the power from the sun. So this campaign and this project that we ran started in 2006. It was finished in 2019. And the other result of this not only is that we installed 3,000 megawatts of solar, but in 2019, the California Energy Commission, often referred to as the CEC, passed a mandate that all new homes built in California starting in 2020 would have to be built with solar panels on them. So we not only see the success in this program, but we're able to see the success going on and on. The second project that I want to talk about is what our president, Wendy Wendlandt, referred to as the Renewable Portfolio Standard. This is oftentimes referred to as the Renewable Energy Standard. And to put it simply, what this law requires is that the utilities or other energy providers in the state of California must purchase a percentage of their clean energy from, or a percentage of their energy from clean energy sources. People on this Zoom call or on the Facebook might remember in 1999 and 2000, California was faced with an energy crisis at the time. The state was on fire. Enron had been manipulating the energy market at the time, and California was facing what was referred to as rolling blackouts. It was a real embarrassment for the state of California. And at the time, the governor's answer to this project was, let's build 60 new fossil fuel power plants. We looked at this problem and said, there must be a different way. Maybe we should diversify where we're getting our energy from. At the time, California was generating about 3 or 4% of its energy from clean energy sources. We organized and we passed a law called the Renewable Energy Standard, which the first one to get passed in 2002 required that utilities generate 20% of their energy from clean energy sources by 2020. When this law was passed and the first contracts were signed, when the utilities went out to find people who could provide them with that electricity, that was a critical moment because we went from being in the textbooks about how economies of scale can work into being into real time. And what the utilities quickly saw is that the renewable industry was able to generate electricity, and they were able to do it at a price that is now cheaper than many of the fossil fuels that compete for the utilities' attention. From this first law that was passed in 2002 that was 20% by 2020, there was another law passed in 2008 that raised that bar and said we're going to get to 33% by 2030. In 2015, there was another law passed that said we'll get to 50% by 2030. And then in 2018, with Environment California and a host of other environmental groups and labor groups and industry groups and religious groups, work with the military, we were able to show the California state legislature and pass a bill that would ensure that we got to 100% clean energy by 2045. It was a monumental day in 2018 when Governor Brown signed that law. It was the day before his climate summit in San Francisco. And it has served as a template for several other states to adopt the same law and the same goal of getting to 100% by 2040, 2045, or 2050, wherever that particular state may see it. And we'll go back to Johanna in a couple minutes to talk about that. So that law has proved effective. And just to give you a little bit of insight into what's happening in California right now, last week, Governor Newsom stated publicly that he thought that the goal of 100% by 2045 was too far off and that we needed to move that up significantly. There have been papers across the state of California that have quoted me and other groups saying it's time to get to 100% clean energy by 2030. Before we go on to that next campaign, I would just ask you to imagine for 1 minute what 100% clean energy looks like in the 5th largest economy in the state of California. And finally, I'll end the part about this is saying, how well are these projects working? Are we able to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we're able to generate in the state of California? And what this chart really clearly shows, especially if you look at the brown triangles, is that in 2000, California was generating about 100 million metric tons of GHGs from electricity, greenhouse gas pollution from electricity. And you can see that as the Renewable Portfolio Standard was passed and implemented, along with some of the other measures like the million solar roofs, we have seen the pollution go down. And it's gone down from about 100, 120 at its peak to now 60 million metric tons. So this to me, from the California Air Resources Board, which is really the premier institution, not only in California, but I think in the country in measuring global warming pollution and figuring out the different steps that we need to reduce it. This shows that in California, the main reason that we've been able to reduce our greenhouse gas pollution is because of the work that the electricity sector has done in moving toward clean, renewable power. And now I'll quickly talk about our third campaign or project that we've just started to launch, which is known as the Million Charging Stations. And if you go to the next slide, please, you'll see a pie chart that really clearly shows what the problem is. And you'll see in light blue that transportation accounts for over 40% of the global warming pollution that California generates. And passenger vehicles account for 28%. So if we're going to stave off the worst impacts of climate change, and we're going to have to do it by moving our transportation to clean energy. For Environment California and Environment America, our goal is to double the number of trips that people take on public transit, that people take by walking, and that people take just by riding the bike in their communities. And that's a big part of what we have to do in order to reduce this number. But the second thing that obviously has to happen is that we need to make sure that all of our cars and trucks and buses are able to move on electricity and not gasoline. That electricity might come from hydrogen, that electricity might come from solar panels, but either way, we've got to be able to move to a place where as we get into our car and go to the grocery store or go to work, we have to be able to do it in a way that does not add more greenhouse gases to our atmosphere. This bill, I'm happy to say, is critical, and California has a goal of installing 1 million charging stations by 2030. Governor Brown has already set a goal of having 5 million electric vehicles in California. So these charging stations, in essence, would complement these vehicles. And I'm proud to say that right now there's a bill on the governor's desk, AB 841 to get technical, which would jumpstart California's drive to getting to 1 million charging stations. It would use rates that have been collected through people's electric bills to help offset the cost of California's electric charging stations in California. It won't get us to 1 million that we need, but it'll continue us on that path. So I'll just say in summary, here in California, we've had 3 fantastic projects that we've been able to work on over the past 2 decades that have really put a dent in the amount of greenhouse gas pollution that we're generating here in the state. We've been able to install almost 9,000 megawatts of rooftop solar. We've been able to pass laws that will get us to 100% clean energy by 2045, and with any luck, by 2030. And we're now looking at transportation and working to get our transportation sector to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas pollution that it creates by building 1 million charging stations in the state of California. And finally, taking off that question of, range anxiety or any concerns that people have with moving from point A to point B in California. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and I'll turn it back to my colleague, Johanna.
Thanks so much, Dan. It is always inspirational for me to hear about the work you've done in California, so thank you. And for me, the exciting thing is that what happens in California doesn't necessarily stay in California. And recently we've seen some really bold and ambitious energy and climate policies bubble up at the national level. I think the most visible one of those is the Green New Deal, sponsored by Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey and New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But there have also been other proposals, like Senator Udall's proposal to transition America's entire electricity sector over to 100% renewable energy that is, has been introduced in Congress. And I have to say that while it's very exciting to see these policies bubble up to the national level, it's also really important to acknowledge that passing the kind of energy and climate legislation that we need through Congress continues to be a really heavy lift. And from my perspective, what's critical right now is that we look at what has given national leaders the confidence to actually introduce these kind of sweeping measures. And the answer to that is simple. What has given national leaders the confidence to set bold goals is the progress on college campuses, in towns, in cities, and in states across America that are putting in place ambitious clean energy goals and meeting them. That is how social change movements in this country have always worked. Just a few months ago, I wrote a blog about the women's suffrage movement, which was also a state-by-state incremental growth strategy and the parallels between that movement and the clean energy movement. And we are in it now. There's a revolution quietly playing out to advance clean energy in the United States, and it's happening at the local and state level. If you could move to the next slide, please. This figure really shows the progress on clean energy happening around the country. And so you can see the light blue states are states that have some kind of renewable energy requirement. These are the renewable electricity standards or renewable portfolio standards that Dan Jacobson was talking about. The deep blue states, the navy states, are states that have set goals and then realized they're not ambitious enough, so they have bumped them up. The orange states are states where we have actually won commitments for 100% clean energy. So, Hawaii led the way, California followed, New Mexico, then Washington State, then Maine, then New York, and most recently, my home state of Virginia, the first Southern state to adopt this commitment. And then the golden states here, or yellow, are the states where Environment America is campaigning right now to put in place commitments for 100% renewable energy. And then I will also say that there are just cities and institutions where this kind of work is happening too. And so I'm excited to share here a picture of my friend and colleague, Jeanette Gayer, right in front in the red pants. Jeanette is the State Director of Environment Georgia, and she has been running hyper-local campaigns in Georgia to advance renewable energy. For example, she has built coalitions and worked with local leaders to pass 100% renewable legislation in the city of Atlanta. And then when Atlanta wasn't enough, she moved to Athens, Georgia, and she made it happen there. And then after Athens, she convinced the city of Savannah, Georgia, to commit to 100% renewable energy. And this fall, Jeanette is planning on pulling together leaders from all those cities to lobby regulators in the state of Georgia to come up with statewide policy to move towards 100% renewable energy. So again, hyper-local, bubbling up. That's how social change movements happen. Next slide, please. I'm also incredibly heartened by the work of our colleague, Doug OMalley in New Jersey. Doug has been working for years to help New Jersey tap into the tremendous offshore wind potential off the coast of New Jersey. And he has done that now. He has won a commitment from the governor of New Jersey to get big amounts of power from offshore wind, and is now working at the legislature to codify that goal. And thanks in part to Doug's leadership, other governors all up and down the Atlantic seaboard feel emboldened to make big commitments to offshore wind. We now have commitments in place to get 25,000 megawatts of power from offshore wind on the Atlantic coast by 2035. And my team and I are working to double down on those commitments and get to the point where we have doubled those commitments over the next 4 years. And then lastly, I am incredibly heartened by the work of our colleagues in Pennsylvania, folks like Flora Cardoni and David Mazur, who are working doggedly this fall to make sure that Pennsylvania joins the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is America's most successful global warming program, and it puts a price on carbon pollution and then rolls those funds into energy efficiency and clean energy. To date, this program has created more than $3 billion in investment in clean energy and climate solutions. And if we can successfully get Pennsylvania to join this set of states, not only is there the symbolic value of a Rust Belt state joining a regional climate compact, but it also has a huge impact, because Pennsylvania alone has almost as much carbon emissions as all the states in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative today combined. When I think about all this work, it gives me such tremendous confidence that we can keep going. And all of that work at the state and local level adds up to the point where when our clean energy advocate Emma Searson crunched the numbers this year, totaling up the state and county and city commitments, fully 1 in 3 Americans now lives in a community that's committed to 100% renewable energy, and the number just is going to keep rising, especially if we keep pushing for it. So that's what I have. Back to you, Wendy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dan and Johanna, really 2 of the nation's leading experts on renewable energy. So you have a great opportunity here with them today. So we have a number of questions that have been posed in the chat, and I will attempt to field those in a minute. But before I do that, let me just tell you, if you're inspired to do more, as many of us have been in the last couple of weeks with the impending doom, apocalypse, whatever word you want to use, I would urge you to go to the Environment America website, to our Global Warming Solutions page, and become a climate defender. And what that means is we ask you to join us over the next 10 weeks. We'll provide you an action a week on climate. And because we're a national network and we're working in 29 states, we know where your particular action can make the most difference each week. So we hope you'll join us there and help us on, obviously, this incredibly important issue. So let's go ahead and take a few questions. Johanna, somebody wants to know a little bit more about solar and the technology, and are we is it still the case that we can't rely on it because it only, solar power only works during the day? Tell us more about where the technology is and how we're going to be able to, can we really, I think the question is really, can we actually rely on renewable energy for our energy needs?
Yep. I think I understand the question, and thank you for asking that question, because it's important that we actually create an electric system that works for everybody and that isn't vulnerable to reliability challenges. So solar definitely needs to play a dominant role in our energy mix, and there are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that solar produces electricity at the time when we most need it. So, at the time when air conditioners are humming and lights are on and everybody's computer is working at kind of the peak hours of the day, that also happens to be when solar is at its best. So in terms of reducing peak demand, it's really critical for that. The second reason why solar deserves a really dominant role in our electricity mix, forgive me, my puppy just walked in, so we might get distracted here. The second reason why solar is really important is it produces energy very close to where we need it. So done right, solar energy on rooftops can be, sorry, forgive me. Thank you, Nick, my husband.
Well, Hannah, let me just jump in and say that.
Yes, please do.
Solar produced on rooftops means that we don't have to move that power through hundreds of miles worth of lines and power lines. And for those of you that know about California's fires or any of those issues, you know that the transmission of electricity over forests and throughout the state of California has been the cause of some of the worst wildfires that we've seen here in the state. And so being able to produce that energy right where you use it is a benefit. So what Johanna is saying, the first reason is it's there exactly when we need it. And in California, that couldn't be more true. Right when the sun goes up, Californians tend to start turning stuff on, especially air conditioners toward the later part of the day. And that's the first thing. The second thing is it's right above your head, and the solar panels can be used for electricity that can be powered into your home or into your local community. The third part I would say, and I haven't really cleared this with Johanna, so you can kick me under the proverbial table if this is totally wrong, but there is a political benefit to local solar power too. The more that you see solar on either your house or your neighbor's house or the school or the Froyo store that's right down the street from you, the more that you, I think, get an inherent sense of what is possible. And I think that's really one of the unknown benefits of solar, which is the political power, if you will, that it allows us to show people all over the state. And I'm going to turn this back to you, Johanna, just to say, I know you've got a report coming out in the next couple of weeks that looks at all the different states and how they use different kinds of power. And what I find interesting about this annual report that comes out is that it's not just the coastal states that are doing really well on renewable energy, but inland states are particularly good when it comes to different kinds of renewable energy. So I don't want to spill the beans too much on that, and we can go to a different question, Wendy, if we've got a lot of them piling up, but I wanted to give Johanna the shot at that too.
Thanks. Now that my puppy's gone, I feel like I can focus a little bit more. So just to echo Dan's point, there are two reasons why solar, for political reasons, are also really important. Number one, this neighbor effect, there's actually a term for it. Like the biggest factor that influences any individual home to going solar is, has their neighbor gone solar? And so the neighbor effect, the more that we can get rooftop solar, the more it spreads, forgive the analogy during COVID days, but it kind of goes viral. And then the second thing is solar is incredibly popular across party lines. Every year, the Pew Research Center puts out a study looking at public opinion on energy, and consistently, very strong majorities of Democrats and Republicans want more solar. We're talking to the degree of like more than 90% of Americans want more solar. And so in terms of kind of meeting the public where they're at, working on solar and continuing to tap into that vast potential, most of which is still untapped, is just a very easy gateway drug on the kind of path towards 100% renewable energy.
Okay, great. Thank you both. I have a couple of different questions that are striking in the urgency of, commitments are great, but basically what are we doing right now? And a similar question from somebody else wondering about the kind of the wildfires themselves, which I think also speaks to, how do we get this to all go faster so that we have better solutions? So Dan, I was thinking you might take it from the standpoint of, what is Governor Newsom able to do by executive order or forcing, quicker action at the legislative level right now? And Johanna, you may have some other thoughts on that too, of like, what are the things, what are we doing right now to fix the problem? Which obviously we've been at this for a long time. And it's, as I said in a Twitter post the other day, there's no silver bullet. I mean, we have to be doing all these things. We have to be increasing energy efficiency. We have to be reducing fossil fuel use, keeping it in the ground, advancing renewable energy, and Environment America does all of those things. But talk a little bit about some of the specifics of what is happening, what's happening now, and how can people help?
Why don't I take the first half of that? Was directed by Wendy, and then pass it back to Johanna. So just to be a little short about it, I think the first question is sort of what is the governor doing about this, or what can the governor do about it in the state of California, at least. So this will be interesting for the people who are following California or California residents. But this was a tough year legislatively for environmental issues. I think most state legislators, as did Congress, had a really difficult time focusing on environmental issues. But there's a couple of things the governor can do right now. First, there is a bill on his desk that I referenced in my earlier presentation, AB 841 by Assemblymember Phil Ting. This bill would put us on a path to building more charging stations, and it would also help increase the energy efficiency at schools by upgrading their heating and cooling air conditioning units, often referred to as HVAC systems. So that's the first thing. The governor, with the stroke of his pen, can enact that into law, and we can start upgrading schools and their energy efficiency programs, and we can start building more charging stations. That's number one. The second thing is, last week, the governor, while standing at in a fire zone, places where firefighters were working to protect homes from a wildfire in California, acknowledged that California has some of the strongest climate targets, but said maybe some of them are a little far out. And in particular, he referenced California's current law, SB 100, that ensures that we get to 100% clean energy by 2045. And he said, maybe we need to speed that up a little bit. The governor has the authority with the California Energy Commission, again, a number of alphabet soup agencies here, to speed that up. And we are encouraging the governor to move to 100% clean energy by 2030.
Okay, great. Johanna, anything to add on that?
I will add here that, in many ways, the progress that we as a society have seen is built on the backs of future generations, right? We have relied on fossil fuels to get our economy to the kind of scale and scope that it is today. And pivoting that whole apparatus is an immense challenge. And I think every day that goes by, people see the urgency of needing to make that pivot, but it still is a massive transformation that needs to happen. So from my perspective, the first thing we need to do is, to use the bathtub analogy, is to turn off the tap, right? If our atmosphere is the bathtub, it is overflowing with carbon dioxide and methane right now, and it's fundamentally destabilizing our climate. So the first thing we need to do before we start thinking about siphoning carbon dioxide and methane out of the atmosphere is turning off the tap. So that means any new infrastructure we build needs to not be fossil fuel infrastructure. It's part of why we are working on doubling down on a campaign on building decarbonization to make sure that we're stopping the direct burning of fossil fuels in our homes. As much as people might love their gas cook stoves, the reality is it's polluting your indoor air and it's contributing to global warming. Same thing with gas furnaces, same thing with gas pipelines. So we have to turn off the tap, and then, you know, all the things that DJ talked about and Wendy talked about, you know, energy efficiency is, you know, it's kind of the best global warming solution that nobody's ever heard of. You know, the reality is 2/3 of the energy that we produce in this country gets wasted. It never gets put to work. It's either lost in transmission or lost in heat at the power plant. And efficiency should be our first fuel. And then once we get more efficient, you know, we can replace the fossil fuels on our grid with wind and solar, but it's going to happen through incremental steps. So folks know what is happening right now. In Massachusetts, the legislature is in the final steps of considering advances in energy efficiency standards for appliances. Same thing in New Jersey. And we are actually have launched just a couple of months ago a campaign to require every new home in America to be a solar home, building off of that policy in California and helping it spread across the country.
Okay, great. We have a question from Michigan. Looks like from Kalamazoo. What is the status of energy storage? Because that's the biggest issue people in Michigan seem to have. Good question.
I'm happy to take a shot at answering that question. One, I've been to Kalamazoo, so I know it's a really lovely part of America, and thank you for the question. When people think about energy storage, I think it's important to understand that there's two different parts of energy storage. There's what is often referred to as long duration storage, and then there's often referred to what is called behind the meter storage. So let me just unpack those a little bit and give you examples of what's going on. When people talk about long duration storage, they're usually talking about fairly large projects, but that would able to store energy for long periods of time. So maybe it's days, maybe it's weeks, it could even be months. A couple of examples of long duration storage that already exist and that are in use around the country. One is a project that is known as repumped hydro. So the idea here is that as water comes over the dam and down into the New River, you would be able to pump that water back up into sort of behind the dam using solar power. That's a project that's popular here in California, where we have a lot of solar power in the middle of the day, too much at sometimes. And so if we could use that energy to sort of take the water back up to the dam, put it back in there, and then when we need that energy later in the day, the same water falls through, creating more energy. That's an example of long duration storage. Another example, which is fairly similar to that, and I know this will sound almost elementary, but there are trains that are on tracks, and when the state has too much energy, those trains are pushed up the track, and as the energy is then needed, the train comes down the track. And it's just that simple motion of big weight coming down through the gravity that helps to produce electricity. Now, those are two simple versions of it. There are a lot more complicated versions of long duration storage that include compressed air and compressed water and other projects like that that are coming to scale right now. And California is one place where the California Energy Commission, again, the CEC, has been looking at different ways in which to incentivize those programs. So that's long duration storage. The other is behind the meter storage, and that's probably what a lot of people think about when they think of sort of the battery pack or the Tesla pack that would often go in your house. This is a piece of equipment that might be the size of a window and the thickness of a shoe, depending on how big your foot is, and it would be installed on your wall. And the idea is you would pair that with solar panels. It doesn't have to be, but for many people, they would pair that with solar panels. And during the day, if you're not home, that power pack would get charged up. And then when you come home, 5, 6 o'clock, you would use the energy from that stored battery to run your home for the rest of the evening. Those people have probably seen they're being sold. If I would hazard a guess that many people on this call have seen that in their Facebook page or other places where those advertisements are coming out. California last year passed a law that created a similar rebate program to the one I was talking about in Million Solar Roofs to behind the meter storage, to those power pack storage, so that they're still a little bit expensive, but if we can create a rebate, give schools or homeowners an opportunity to purchase those, the more of those power packs that get purchased, the lower the price will come. So there's two different kinds of storage. There's long duration storage and there's behind the meter storage. Both are starting to take off. Both need more investment from states and from the national government, but we have the technology to do it, and it's really exciting to see them coming online.
And I will say, I think the technology is just getting better and better. The same way that 15 years ago, solar panels were getting maybe 8% efficiency and now are at 22, 25% efficiency. We're seeing that same trend with batteries. And in the report that Environment America is putting out next month called Renewables on the Rise, scheduled for release October 19th, we'll be looking at the growth and adoption as well as the falling costs of battery, along with 4 other key clean energy technologies.
And just add it, for those of you that follow Elon Musk, today is Battery Day, and he is announcing that he has invented a 1,000,000-mile battery. I think he got that from my 1,000,000 solar homes, but I'm not positive. But today he is announcing that he has a battery that will go for 1,000,000 miles. I don't have the details on that. You can Google it. I think it was reported in the LA Times this morning. I'm sure there will be more about that. But interesting, just to continue what Johanna was saying, the technology continue to get better and better and better. And obviously, Mr. Musk making a powerful statement today, pun intended.
Very funny. Okay, we probably have time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. We have a question about electric buses, which we have done some work on. So I don't know, Johanna or Dan, which of you is better situated to tell us about what's happening with electric buses, because that's obviously something governments can purchase electric buses. And in particular, we've been concerned about school buses because there's a lot of diesel school buses. So getting them to be electric helps the planet and helps the health of our kids. One of you want to talk about that?
I'm happy to give it a California shot, and then if Johanna wants to go and talk about it from a national level, that might be the best way to answer it. Here in California, we've been really concerned about buses, and 2 years ago, we launched a campaign to ensure that all of the buses that were purchased in the state by 2030 would be electric buses, and that by 2040, every single bus in the state would be an electric bus. What we found were a couple of key things that are important. First, obviously, the electric bus is going to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas pollution that it's emitting. Second is that many buses will go through communities that have historically had some of the worst air pollution in California, which it's a horrible place to be, number one, but California is for decades now been the leader in air pollution, and switching to zero emission buses is a fantastic way to help alleviate some of those problems in those communities. Third is that these now buses have been proven to be less expensive over time than the fossil fuel buses, so communities are able to save money. And fourth, this is a particular advantage in California. We are lucky enough to have some companies that are manufacturing those buses in California. And so it hits on a number of spots that California policymakers are enthusiastic about.
Okay, great. Johanna, anything to add?
I mean, I will say that this is a spot where the need for electric buses is also recognized at the national level, and our sister organization, US PIRG, back when Senator Kamala Harris was just a senator and not also a vice presidential candidate, we worked very closely with her to draft national legislation to advance electric bus infrastructure and funding to communities to go electric with their buses.
Okay, great. We have one last late breaking question, which is the same EV technology that's available for buses also possible for fire trucks and garbage trucks, which I think might also be an opportunity to talk about solar on fire stations too, which is another little angle on all this. There's so many great things we could be doing. The technology is not our problem here. The politics are the problem.
Yeah. I would love to jump in here really quickly and just share a little story that I experienced last year. my family and I, we were spending a year living in Munich, Germany, which is where I'm from originally. And I took my kids on a tour of an industrial site where they were working on digging out a major transit tunnel under the city of Munich to build a new rail line. And they had electric big rigs to haul the fill from the dig site to the outskirts of town. And when I talked with the project manager, he actually said that the electric buses were a key part of their project plan, because downtown Munich is where they were doing the digging, is an incredibly vibrant place during the middle of the day. And the idea that you would be taking loud trucks hauling this waste through the town in the middle of the day just didn't work. It would have caused too much traffic. It would have been too noisy. But they also couldn't take really loud trucks through the heart of town in the middle of the night because people are trying to sleep. And because the electric buses are close to silent when they run, they are actually able to run the buses through the heart, or the trucks through the heart of town in the middle of the night, dramatically reducing their costs. So I just think it's a prime example of how the technology from the cars and the buses is scalable to other, technologies, trucks, trash trucks, absolutely. And that it expands the realm of the possible in terms of what we can expect from those services and how work gets done in America once we make this transition.
Okay, great. So we're just about at time. I'd like to give both Dan and Johanna just a minute, if any final words of wisdom, since we've assembled a great group here today of people concerned about what they can do. Again, before I do that, I'll point you back to the Climate Defender website. The person who's been putting together that campaign says that upcoming actions will address renewable energy, reducing vehicle emissions, increasing the electrification of vehicles, with most actions targeted at governors, because as one of the great strengths of our network is that a majority of work that we do is at the state level. So again, we know when there's key actions happening, it's at the state level, and we'll be asking all of you to participate in that. So back to Johanna and Dan, final last words.
Well, I think I would just say, we know how to solve this problem, and we know how to stave off the worst impacts of climate change, but we have to do it now. And waiting for 10 years or 20 years and then trying to figure it out, that's just not going to work. And sadly, I'll just, say that, again, here in California, where a lot of times people usually think of sunshine and beaches and, some of the most beautiful places on earth, for the past couple of weeks, we've just been whacked yet again with some of the impacts of climate change. And to be honest, it's really scary to wake up every day and have to look at where the fires are, have to look at how bad the air quality is. And what's really frustrating about it is to know that there's a better way. And for 33 years, I've been working with Environment America all over the country, and for the past 20 years here in California. And there's nothing I'm prouder of than the accomplishments that we have, but more importantly, the campaigns that we're working on and the accomplishments that we will achieve.
Thanks, Dan. Johanna?
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for coming onto the webinar and joining us today. I think anytime that you are faced with a huge problem, like how do we break our country and our planet's addiction to fossil fuels and decouple, everything from that, it's a massive undertaking. And I think of the parallel, I don't know if folks have read the book Bird by Bird, but it's the story of a parent who is guiding her child through writing a book report about birds. And he says, "Mom, I just don't know where to start." And the mom says, "Kiddo, just take it bird by bird." And I think that's really good advice for when you're tackling a huge problem like solving global warming. We just need to take it bird by bird. Let's make bold steps on solar, win that progress, and then do it again. Let's take bold steps on wind. Let's secure that progress and then do it again. Let's take action and then take action again. And if we do it bird by bird, we can build the movement that we need to win.
That seems like excellent advice from Johanna. So again, thank you so much to everybody who's joined us. You can visit the Environment America website to learn more about other issues we work on. People ask questions about other issues that we didn't tackle on this call because Johanna and Dan were really prepared to talk about energy, so we wanted to dedicate the entire hour to that, but definitely go visit our website and learn about all the other issues that we work on. You also will see in your browser, in most cases, you'll actually have a link directly to Climate Defender, so you can sign up right there, or I know it's in the chat. And again, thank you to all of you who are Green Century investors. Investing fossil fuel free, that's certainly one action that people can take. And thank you to those of you who are members of Environment America or any of our state organizations, and to the rest of you who are not one of those things, join us in one of those ways. Again, thank you so much for joining us in this Climate Week, and good luck to all of us. Thank you.